You've now had ABC do a settlement with Donald Trump. ABC News didn't want to do it, but Disney overruled ABC News and did it. You now have Paramount who did it. CBS News didn't want to do it. They wanted to fight. It happened anyway. You've had there's lawsuits at CNN right now, and there's this fear that because Trump has had success essentially extracting money out of Disney for ABC and George Stephanopoulos and CBS and Paramount, that's exactly his goal with CNN and Warner Brothers. So,
Right.
look, it is a very uncomfortable situation for journalists.
Let's look at a regular close look at the United States. We call this Trump's world, and I want to welcome now to the program Chuck Todd, the former presenter of NBC's Meet the Press and host of the podcast, the Chuck Toddcast. Hello to you, Chuck. Good to talk to you again. We met in Washington not so long ago. Good to have you back on the show.
We did. Good to see you from afar.
Now, Chuck, I mean, the big story when it comes to politics and the media in America right now, Paramount has reached, haven't they, a $16 million settlement with President Trump, who was suing over that recorded interview for the program 60 Minutes with Kamala Harris before the election. Now, that settlement, that whole case has caused such a lot of debate and concern in the U.S. media. Just tell us your view.
Well, it looks like a pay-to-play settlement. Why? Because Paramount, the parent company of CBS News, is trying to do a merger. In order to get the merger approved, who is in charge? Who's the head of government? Who would be in essence head of the agency that would decide whether this merger gets approved or not? And it's obviously President Trump. So and in fact, there's a U.S. Senator, Ron Wyden, who has said, the next time Democrats are in charge of either the House or the Senate in our Congress, there's going to be an oversight investigation, and there's going to be questions about whether this meets the definition of bribery. It certainly feels like a quid pro quo of some sort. I could tell you every journalist that works at CBS is appalled. Let me backtrack. I can't speak for every journalist at CBS. The journalists that I know at CBS are appalled. There's all sorts of hand-wringing about this. Look, this is something I've been railing about, to be frank, is that the publicly traded corporations that own some of the most important brand names in news, ABC News, NBC News, CBS News, Fox, CNN, all five of those entities are owned by publicly traded companies. You've now had ABC do a settlement with Donald Trump. ABC News didn't want to do it, but Disney overruled ABC News and did it. You now have Paramount who did it. CBS News didn't want to do it. They wanted to fight. It happened anyway. There's lawsuits at CNN right now, and there's this fear that because Trump has had success essentially extracting money out of Disney for ABC and George Stephanopoulos and CBS and Paramount, that's exactly his goal with CNN and Warner Brothers. So, look, it is a very uncomfortable situation for journalists at those media entities right now.
And this argument raises deep, deep questions of principle, doesn't it? From the White House, counter-argument is that they're dealing with fake news. They claim the interview with Kamala Harris was edited in a way which politically favored her.
Right.
I mean, the counter-argument then is this wasn't about defamation. It's hard to generally thought that it would be difficult to win this as a defamation case. It was brought under a different statute anyway. But the fear on Paramount's side was federal government retribution, that they would be punished through the power of the presidency. And that argument raises all sorts of deeper questions about the use of executive power. And you're articulating some of them, but you're saying it's really quite widespread in the media, although the media in America is so polarized.
It really is. And look, the First Amendment's pretty strong. If it wasn't very strong, Donald Trump's media companies would be subject to a lot of lawsuits because of how often they do character assassination and disparagement of individuals. But there's First Amendment protections on this. Well, the First Amendment applies to everybody. Okay, it applies to CBS News, applies to ABC News, et cetera. So this is what there's a widespread concern about right now, and that's what he really is doing. It's sort of, I always equate it to the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, and the very first one where all of a sudden they figure out, hey, they're testing the electric fence and they're not testing the same parts of the fence each time. He's testing the fence and he's finding the weak spots. And Paramount desperate for. And look, all these corporations, I hate to say this, but they do have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders, not the general public. And unfortunately, these news businesses are no longer cash cows for these media companies. And so as a business decision, they're like, nah, it's not worth the fight because we have so much more money at stake with the merger, or we have so much more money at stake with this that we'd be harming our shareholders. And then these corporate lawyers argue that shareholders would file a lawsuit that they didn't actually look out for the fiduciary responsibility of them. So what it really introduces is a lot of uncomfortable questions about whether corporate ownership of media and truth in media can go together.
Yeah, I mean, on another front, we on this program, we quite often dip into the White House news briefing, usually Karen Levitt addressing and taking questions from the media. And now we've seen the way the complexion of that briefing has changed. There is a core, it seems to be quite a strong core in the room of Trump-friendly online journalists and organizations. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, they would say it's perfectly reasonable to widen the range of outlets. The media's evolved.
Well, I tend to agree with that, and I would widen the aperture. The question is, are they widening their aperture, or as they widen one part? I was a brass player, so I look at my embouchure. Are they actually only widening the right side of their embouchure, not the left side or even the center side? So, look, they're trying to do that. They're trying to change the complexion of the news media that surrounds the president. And they've largely succeeded in doing that, because even journalists who are at mainstream news organizations, they've been pulling back on their questions because the Trump White House makes threats to these news organizations behind the scenes. And I want to be careful here with the information that I know, but there are journalists who have been told to back off in that room by various entities because the parent companies don't want to be put in the Trump crosshairs.
All right, last question. Something which has certainly to my eyes, and I think so many people in this country, I keep now seeing these advertisements for Trump fragrances and colognes. It is merchandising in the name of the president of a kind which just seems weird to our eyes. And we've got Trump watches on sale, so much merchandise, to say nothing of the bigger business, arguably, of the Trump cryptocurrency, all of it. It seems such a plain conflict of interest. I just wonder what impression all this makes on public opinion in America, because here it would be literally unthinkable.
I thought it was unthinkable in our country. But, Donald Trump has broken a lot of norms and rules. And I think one of the things that we fail to fully appreciate, and I've had this conversation with various Trump supporters at different rallies over the years, where you tell voters, well, aren't you really want, he's going to just try to make money off of you. He sees you as a mark or whatever. And he's like, yeah, well, he's being honest about it. Every other politician also tries to make money off of me, but they lie to me to my face. There's this weird acceptance that this is who he is. And they knew who he is when they voted for him the first time. And many of us have wondered, boy, they must not know who he is, right? And then you sit here and you're like, look at all the different ways he's trying to monetize the presidency, which is corruptible behavior. I'm not saying it's corruption on its face yet, but it's corruptible, which what we're seeing. And yet so far, it hasn't turned his voters off, right? We've seen this. So I think this is one of those things, whether we want to accept this or not, where many voters knew this going in. I mean, Trump steaks, Trump water, Trump vodka. We went through this before. Trump the board game. This is Donald Trump in the 90s went through this, and he's had failed business after failed business, and now he's using the White House to do this. I continue to believe this will eventually be his undoing, but so far it hasn't. Whether it's the Qatar plane where he's going to keep the plane after the presidency. I do believe, and when you look at the history, recent history, when we sort of fire a political party and hire another one, corruption is usually at the center of the messaging of the successful campaigns that oust incumbents. And I do think this is going to become heavier and heavier political baggage. But his base accepted it because they accepted the premise of Trump from the very beginning. He had Trump steaks and Trump water back in 2015 when he came down that escalator.